What if Palpatine revealed himself to Obi-Wan instead of Anakin? What would have happened then? Let's find out. In this timeline, the Jedi Order had expelled Anakin Skywalker for his secret marriage. The official reason was insubordination. Obi-Wan had kept the marriage off the records to spare them a public scandal. Anakin was grateful for that and assumed Yoda had placed him under surveillance after Geonosis. 2 years later, Anakin had rebuilt his life. Admiral in the Republic Navy with Palpatine's help, his victories on every HoloNet channel, his marriage no longer hidden. Throughout it all, Obi-Wan maintained contact but kept a strange distance. Padme noticed. She never trusted him, remembered his contempt for Anakin on Tatooine, his coldness toward her during their security assignment a decade later, the suspicious timing of the expulsion. She connected the dots Anakin couldn't see, freed from the brotherly filter that had always blinded him. When she laid it out, Anakin finally saw it too. He confronted his former master. Obi-Wan confessed everything. It wasn't Yoda, it was him. He'd followed them to Naboo, witnessed the ceremony, reported it to the council, recommended expulsion. Years of resentment poured out. Anakin walked away without a word. What followed was Obi-Wan's desperate attempt at reconciliation. Every calm was ignored, every approach rebuffed. Eventually he went to the one person he thought might serve as a mediator, Chancellor Palpatine. What Obi-Wan couldn't know was that Palpatine had already convinced himself this was a sign. The war had served its purpose, the pieces were in position, and now a vulnerable Jedi had walked into his office, seeking help. Surely the dark side was guiding him, showing him the time had come. So Palpatine talked, and talked, dragged the conversation through pleasantries and tangents while the sun crawled across the sky, until the light drained from his face entirely and shadow consumed his features. Then, with the theatrical timing he'd spent years rehearsing, he revealed himself. Darth Sidious, orchestrator of the Clone Wars, the Sith Lord the Jedi had spent years hunting. He wanted Obi-Wan to summon the council. He expected a confrontation he would win. He let him go. Obi-Wan raced toward the temple, his own delusions already taking hold. The Force had shown him the truth. It had chosen him. The Jedi who had done what was right even when it cost him everything, who had expelled his own apprentice, rather than let attachment corrupt the Order. He was the one the light had selected. He needed to contact Yoda on Kashyyyk through the temple's long-range array, but he couldn't waste time. Still on the speeder, he calmed Bail Organa and told him everything. Bail called Padme. Minutes later, Padme contacted Obi-Wan directly. She had information he needed. He couldn't wait, meet her before he did anything else. Another sign. He went to her, and in that private meeting, she dismantled every path except one. Official channels were compromised. The Senate belonged to Palpatine. The courts would never convict. The clones answered to him. Any Jedi action would be branded a coup. She cut off every avenue of support with elegant, inescapable logic, until only one option remained. Someone had to act outside the system. Someone had to bear that burden alone. She knew which guilt to weaponize, which duty to invoke, and she left him with one final insight. Palpatine's arrogance was his blind spot. He believed everyone was predictable, that every variable bent to his design. She'd seen him in the Senate when something unexpected broke his model, just a flicker of panic before he recovered. But in a moment where recovery was impossible, Obi-Wan saw it as the final sign. The Force had chosen him to destroy the Sith, and now it was showing him how. He accepted the weight she offered and left. Hours later, he returned to Palpatine's office alone, a minicam on his belt recording everything. He wore something beneath his robes, an explosive weave designed by Barriss Offee, Jedi healer and advanced weapons researcher. Reactive fabric that detonated under sufficient energy. A few threads could reduce a speeder to twisted wreckage. Obi-Wan had an entire concentrated patch across his chest. The cam captured it all. His declaration that he wouldn't let Palpatine destroy the Republic. Palpatine's calm, very well. The ignition of the red blade, the duel, and finally, the lightning, which provided more than enough energy. The blast consumed them both. Obi-Wan's pre-recorded confession reached every major outlet within the hour. It explained everything. Who Palpatine really was, the orchestration of the war, why he had to act alone. The cam footage was attached, undeniable proof. The Republic fractured, then slowly reassembled. The footage spoke for itself. Palpatine exposed as a Force cultist who'd tried to destroy the Republic. His faction scrambled to distance themselves from the wreckage. Padme's coalition filled the vacuum. Anakin and the Council testified publicly. Obi-Wan was a hero who made an impossible choice. The war continued. Dooku publicly denied any connection to Palpatine, dismissed the accusations as Republic propaganda, and used doubles and holograms to convince Grievous that Sidious still lived. Padme hadn't orchestrated anything, not exactly. She'd seen Palpatine's trap, seen the desperate Jedi walking into it, and nudged him toward an outcome that served her purposes. She expected something messy, something she could work with. Both of them dying was better than she dared hope. Palpatine exposed. The Chancellorship hers without another move. Almost too easy. Padme smiled. Roughly a standard month after the explosion, the day before an election whose outcome everyone already knew, the Temple prepared to honor their fallen master. Obi-Wan Kenobi was now a hero, the man who'd stopped a mad cultist from destroying the Republic. The memorial was held in the Temple Gardens at dawn, overcast sky pressing low over the assembled mourners. It was a modest affair, 10 rows of white wooden chairs, 10 seats per row, arranged in neat lines facing a raised platform 10 meters wide, half a meter high, just enough to elevate a speaker above the crowd, with a simple podium at its center. Holographic projectors flanked the platform on either side, each casting 5-meter-tall images of Obi-Wan that faded slowly from one to the next. Obi-Wan as a young Padawan, Obi-Wan during the Battle of Naboo, Obi-Wan standing with the Council, Obi-Wan in meditation. Seating followed Temple protocol. Senior Masters in the front rows, Knights behind them, Padawans toward the back. Non-Jedi dignitaries stood clustered in the far back. Behind the platform, a massive tree stood sentinel 20 meters high, its bare branches spreading like skeletal arms over the gathering. Through hidden speakers, somber funeral music played from a HoloNet streaming service, the free tier specifically. The melody kept buffering, cutting out once or twice a minute, each pause hanging just long enough to be uncomfortable before stuttering back to life. And every 10 minutes, the audio cut out entirely, but not from buffering. A promoted track would erupt at twice the volume, aggressive beats and guttural lyrics. Or a commercial, a cheerful voice inquiring whether the listener was tired of interruptions, a passive-aggressive reminder that premium subscribers never experienced such inconveniences. 30 seconds each, crystal clear, no buffering whatsoever. Then the funeral music would resume, and begin buffering again. No one said anything, no one looked around. It was what it was. The music paused as the Grand Master of the Jedi Order made his way to the podium, walking stick clicking against the platform. The assembled mourners turned their attention to him. Anakin stood in the far back behind the chairs, among the cluster of non-Jedi officials representing the Republic, arms held behind him in the rigid posture of an admiral at attention. His uniform placed him among the Republic's military officials, though his history set him apart. Former Padawan to the deceased, expelled from the Order, now standing at his master's memorial. To the side, Vice-Chancellor Mas Amedda stood surrounded by his staff, the highest-ranking government presence. Notably absent was Senator Padme Amidala, the presumptive next Chancellor. She had sent Dorme in her stead, the bodyguard standing quietly beside Anakin with an expression of sympathy. Several minutes passed. Yoda's eulogy wandered into strange territory. Low midi-chlorian count he had when first came to us, the Grand Master was saying, his voice wavering with age, amplified across the assembly. Worked harder than most? Yes. But think about it you must. After very well, said Palpatine. Why stay? Run out. Kenobi could have. Proof enough that would be, yes? Sith Lord confirmed. Kept his life. He would have... He stopped, letting out a reedy laugh. Yes. Curious, that is. Very curious. He trailed off, eyes distant, then stammered into something about the nature of the Force and whether anyone had seen his walking stick. He could have sworn he'd brought it. To his left, Dorme leaned in. Is he... all right, Annie? I hope so, Anakin said quietly. He was glad this was a private ceremony. No HoloNet coverage, no journalists, no recording droids. Just this modest gathering, watching the Grand Master of the Jedi Order ramble about midi-chlorian counts and question why Obi-Wan hadn't simply run away. He'd sensed Barriss nearby for a while now, her presence flickering at the edge of his awareness, but hadn't sought her out. The situation, the sadness, the weight of it all. But now she was walking toward him, and he could sense she wasn't sad at all. If anything, pleased to have spotted him. She appeared beside him to his right. Anakin, she said, reaching over to squeeze his left shoulder, a brief, familiar gesture. Barriss, he replied, his hand coming up to cover hers for a moment before they both let go. They took one short look at each other, her in a black suit, black gloves, dark sunglasses. He caught a glimpse of himself in those lenses. His hair was a mess. Hers weren't the only eyes behind dark panels, though most of the others had different reasons. A faint haze of Lunaweed smoke had drifted through the air before the ceremony began, and half the attendees were hiding bloodshot eyes behind tinted lenses. Jedi, dignitaries, all of them. Yoda was still rambling. Barriss leaned in. I finally reviewed the logs. He used my Dynalar-V prototype, version 7. Walked it into the most secure building in the galaxy. Passed every scanner, every security protocol, and took out the Chancellor. She let out an amused huff. You couldn't design a better demonstration if you tried. Luckily, none of that made it into the coverage. Thank the Force for that. Anakin tried to tune her out by focusing on Yoda's eulogy. He wasn't sure which dishonored Obi-Wan more. Always saying Obi-Wan was, energy field created by all living things, the Force is. Surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. Cosmic cope, that was. Low midi-chlorian cope, for those without the gift. Very philosophical, very compensatory, yes. Lowered the midi-chlorian threshold, the Council did. 500 years ago. Mistake, that was. But dwell on this, we should not. His finger rose, sweeping across the assembled Jedi. Where was I? Yes, Obi-Wan. Tried his best. He did. Several masters in the front rows traded uneasy looks. One of the elder masters who had been weeping openly stopped, looking up in confusion. Mace Windu simply stared ahead, his expression flat and resigned. He'd expected something like this. The diagnosis had been unambiguous. Yoda's mild cognitive impairment was degenerative, irreversible. Barriss went on beside Anakin, oblivious or indifferent to both his silence and Yoda's continued dissent. Defense Appropriations Committee wants a full briefing next month, which means I'll need to accelerate the timeline on Barriss. Shut up, Anakin hissed without turning. Her hands dropped. She turned to look at him, crossed her arms, looked back toward the stage. Her breathing quickened. She turned to him. I'm sorry, Admiral. Didn't realize you were on your Enough. The man is dead. You're at a funeral. Show some respect, Anakin said, his voice low. Really, Admiral? I hadn't noticed. No, really, I thought this was a birthday party. She tilted her head slightly toward the stage. Look, they even got the birthday clown out here. Anakin stared straight ahead, saying nothing. Barriss glanced at him once more, then turned forward. They stood in silence as Yoda continued. 5 minutes passed, maybe longer. He wandered through memories, half-finished thoughts, observations that trailed into nothing. The crowd sat in patient silence, waiting for something that resembled a conclusion. Then his tone became cheerful. And now, important it is to rejoice in those who become one with the Force. Yes, death. Not an ending it is, merely a transformation. Celebrate life we must. The energy of those departed, it surrounds us still, binds us together in joy and remembrance. Rigid in our grief we cannot be. Flow like water, the Force does. And so too must we flow, yes. Special performance, arranged I have, to honor this truth. Art, music, expression, these too are manifestations of the Force. Welcome, please, Sean McKells. Anakin stayed still. Barriss slung an arm over his shoulder. Oh, I'm sure this will be tasteful, she murmured. Appropriate, respectful, in no way ridiculous or embarrassing for everyone involved. The musician emerged from behind the stage, shirtless, golden microphone in hand, flanked by a full crew of dancers and backup performers. They took their positions on stage while Yoda settled into his chair at the side. A woman's voice shrieked, high-pitched, adoring, cutting through the garden silence. Then the opening notes began, electronic, pulsing, upbeat. Within seconds, as the performer began singing about his own attractiveness and appeal, it became clear this was perhaps slightly inappropriate for a memorial service. Barriss was shaking with silent laughter. Mikhails moved through the assembled mourners, singing directly at several elder Jedi in the front rows. When he reached Yokastanu's section, he delivered the lines about not being anyone's plaything with exaggerated emphasis, pointing directly at her face. Objectified, he refuses to be, Yoda said, nodding from his chair on stage. Strong with the Force, this message is. Much to learn from this, we have... Several faces turned toward him, Windu's among them, flat and unreadable. Why were they looking at him like that? Were they not feeling the Force in this moment? Was the celebration he had arranged not reaching them? A celebration of life through art. The Force flowed through all expression, binding joy and sorrow into unity. That was the teaching, wasn't it? The philosophy he had lived by for 800 years. And where had he put his walking stick? Barriss had buried her face against Anakin's shoulder, her entire body convulsing with suppressed laughter. Anakin stood statue still, expression blank, as though by not reacting, he could will himself somewhere else. Barriss paused, lifted her head. Her hand slid from his shoulder to his bicep and squeezed. I think you've put on some muscle. Anakin said nothing. What happened? Don't get to spend much time with Padme these days? The performance continued. Padme won in a landslide. Chancellor Amidala moved swiftly to consolidate power and address what she framed as a critical security gap. After a Jedi Master had assassinated the Supreme Chancellor, however justified, the Order could no longer operate with complete autonomy. Too much power, too little oversight. An executive order created a new coordination office between the Jedi Council, the Senate, and military command. Anakin Skywalker was selected to lead it, former Jedi, decorated military commander, uniquely positioned to bridge all three institutions. When he met with the council, the discussion was surprisingly cordial. Mace Windu acknowledged the new reality with pragmatic grace, admitted the arrangement pushed boundaries, but understood the necessity. He made clear he'd never been against Anakin personally. Wary of his power, yes, but he'd deferred to Obi-Wan's judgment. Anakin already knew most of this from conversations with Yoda and Ki-Adi-Mundi. The picture had become clear. Life was good. Anakin had the power he'd always wanted, and sometimes he thought of Obi-Wan, not the betrayal, but the years before, the man who'd trained him, who'd died a hero. He never learned it was Padme who'd pushed him toward that office. With Sidious gone, Dooku assessed his position. He had accumulated enough wealth through war profiteering to fund something ambitious. 3 Death Stars instead of 1. Smaller, faster to build. 15 years in the unknown regions. Then return with overwhelming force. Conquer the galaxy properly this time. First, he needed to end the war and disappear with the funds. He ordered Grievous to execute the separatist leadership. The cyborg complied, never questioning. Then Dooku leaked the footage publicly, framed Grievous as a rogue madman who'd gone too far. The cyborg was soon killed. With everyone dead, Dooku negotiated surrender and took the money. The separatist movement collapsed. Months later, standing on an observation deck in the unknown regions, he overlooked the construction site, empty space, where the first station would soon rise. He paused to take in the moment, the vision of what would be, a monument to his ambition, his patience, dramatic, as Bane had always advised. And then something ruptured in his brain, neural misfires, blood vessels bursting, electrical signals scattering into chaos. His left side went numb, his vision tunneled, his breath came in gasps. He collapsed alone, discovered hours later by construction droids who didn't understand what they were looking at. The Count had failed to count his own age. The Death Star plans died with him. The galaxy continued spinning. Wars ended. New conflicts emerged. Life went on. And somewhere in the Force, if the dead truly watched from beyond, perhaps Obi-Wan Kenobi saw it all unfold and felt something like peace. Or perhaps not. The Force works in mysterious ways. Or so they say.